I'm very pleased to welcome Professor Martin Peitz as our speaker today. And Martin Peitz has been professor of economics at the University of Mannheim since 2007. And since 2009, he's also the director of the Mannheim Center of Competition and Innovation. He frequently trains and advises EU and non-EU government agencies on competition and regulation issues. He's also a member, or he was a member of the Economic Advisory Group on Competition Policy at the European Commission and an academic director of the Center on Regulation in Europe. So Martin has published widely in leading economic journals, such as the European Economic Review, the International Journal of Industrial Organization, or the Scandinavian Journal of Economics. And today he's going to present his work on the role of ad blockers for publishers, advertisers, and consumers' welfare. So his presentation is going to take about 30 minutes, and after that, Phillip Schmidt-Dengler from the Vienna University will provide a short comment, which will take about 10 minutes, I guess. And that leaves us in the end with about 20 minutes for the general discussion. So please don't forget to mute your micros. Any discussion inputs, please leave for the last part of the seminar. But of course, if you have any questions for understanding, you can just raise your hand and unmute yourself then and ask Professor Peitz for clarifications. So I think that's it from my side. And with that, I ask you to give your full attention to Martin Peitz. The floor is yours.
Thanks a lot. Thank you for the invitation. I will talk about ad blocking. This is joint work with Anton Sobolev and Paul Wegener, both now in Mannheim, but Anton has a history in Vienna, so he did his PhD in Vienna. So there's a nice connection then to Vienna. I will look at, so that's what the title says, ad blocking with the practice of whitelisting, and then focus on advertiser competition. Ad blocking has been around for some time. It has been in the courts also for some time. There's a decision by the highest German court, the BGH, and in their press release, they said the offer of the ad blocking program, and that's AdBlock Plus, is the leading ad blocker in Germany, does not violate the law against unfair competition. And because as a starting point, you could think, well, ad blocking looks like an activity which just deprives publishers of revenues. So it's asking then for money in order for ads which are blocked, that some of them are unblocked again, will be shown again. And some people have called that a rather criminal activity. Essentially, you're closing the door. You haven't been playing any role there. Now suddenly you're closing the door by having the ad blocker installed with a consumer, and then in order to open the door again, the publisher is supposed to pay. Okay. Well, at least it doesn't violate, according to the BGH, it doesn't violate the law against unfair competition. There are also questions about anti-competitive, whether that constitutes anti-competitive behavior. That's not the point of this paper. What I want to look at is what are the competitive effects of ad blocking, and here taking into account that advertisers are competitors in the marketplace. So that's what this paper is about. It's a theory paper, so we develop a simple theory which allows us to assess the effects. Well, so what is an ad blocker? It's a third-party software, and that prevents advertising being displayed on publishers' website, but it's done selectively. So it's not that all advertising is necessarily blocked. Some of the publishers pay to be what is called whitelisted. So they pay to the ad blocker, and in return, these ads, the ads with that publisher will be shown. Ad blocking is widely used, in particular on desktops. Most recent numbers from the US, around 1/3, in Germany a bit more than 1/3 of internet users have installed an ad blocker. The key business proposition of ad blockers is what I was mentioning before, is this practice of whitelisting. So that is not to block the ads of selected publishers and in return get a fraction of ad revenues, of the ad revenues associated with this practice of whitelisting. And that's the main source of revenue. They also sometimes have some premium versions which they sell, so where they obtain some subscription revenues. But the main form of making money for these ad blockers is to take a fraction of ad revenues which are whitelisted, which then also clearly tells us that the incentive of the ad blocker is not to block all advertising, but to block some of the advertising, because otherwise there wouldn't be any revenue if all ads were blocked. And AdBlock Plus, as our example, well, they take 30% of the ad revenues. And you have heard the 30% in other parts of the internet, so it seems that 30 is a very important, very prominent number, and that number also applies to ad blocking. And the last piece of information I would like to share on this slide is that ad blockers arguably have market power. At least in many countries, this market is highly concentrated. If we take the German market, the number was reported by the OLG, the court in Munich, for AdBlock Plus, and at that point in time it had a 95% market share. That's as good as it can get to talk about the monopoly market, and that's what we will be doing in our theory. We will assume that the ad blocker is a monopolist. Well, what do we know about ad blocking? There are a few empirical studies which have been published, some of them recently, but one actually longer time ago. There it is about ad blocking in television, and Wilbur finds that ad blocking tends to decrease content provider revenues. Sounds reasonable, right? So publishers will have less money left once ad blockers are active. And in a more recent work by Schiller and co-authors, they found not only that publishers' revenues go down, but also that consumers visit the publisher's website less often. That may at first glance sound contradictory, because now these websites have become, the publishers' websites have become more attractive. There's less advertising there once consumers have installed an ad blocker. So you wonder, why is it that they visit less often? So one possibility could be quality issues. I mean, how quickly the website is loading. But perhaps the preferred interpretation could be that there is a response in quality, content quality. Publishers have less money available, and therefore they may also spend less money on content. And it's not just about availability, it's also about incentives. If they get only a fraction of what they make, the incentive of incurring additional investment costs may be less. And there's a recent paper by Chaudhry, which argues, or at least that's the way we would like to read it, that there are product market effects of those ad blockers. So I quote from this paper: ad blockers significantly decrease spending for heavy online advertisers, as well as for brands that consumers have not experienced in the past. So that suggests that it depends on the position of an advertiser in the marketplace, how they will be affected indirectly through the ad blocking of publishers. And we will look at this question of what are the effects of ad blockers, taking into account product market interactions. And as far as we know, this has not been done in the previous literature. Let me mention a few aspects of how the theory literature has looked at ad blocking. One observation has been made is that, well, you might think that ad blocking reduces ad volume. However, you should ask, who is going to install an ad blocker? Well, arguably those people who are most negatively affected by advertising, who experience have a very high nuisance cost from advertising. Now, if those people install the ad blocker, there's a different composition then of consumers left without an ad blocker. And those consumers do not mind more advertising as much as those who have installed the ad blocker, and therefore, with the presence of the ad blocker, those consumers who have not installed an ad blocker may actually see more ads. So there is a possibly negative effect of the availability of ad blockers on those consumers who decide not to install the ad blocker. Also in theory models, the effect on publisher profits have been investigated. One argument is that, well, it may not be that bad for publishers, even though they are complaining about ad blocking, because of price discrimination possibilities which become available through ad blocking. However, if publishers are negatively affected, they may respond, and this is what other work has looked at and included the endogenous provision of content. So content quality will be then endogenous, and publishers may reduce content quality in response to ad blocking, and that's clearly a negative effect to consumers. So while consumers at first hand, the direct effect is that they see less advertising, where we have seen, at least that's the argument made by Anderson and Ganz, that this has to be, that the effects are a bit more ambiguous, because some people actually may get more advertising, and secondly, content quality may go down. Then there are other contributions which I don't want to explain here in detail. Our angle is to look at product market interaction, the fact that ad blocking affects the way advertisers behave in the marketplace. Okay. We will look at a model with a single ad blocker who offers whitelisting at a fee. There will be two publishers, and each publisher has one ad slot available in a given product category. And then there are two competing advertisers offering imperfect substitutes, differentiated products. Consumers either have installed the ad blocker or have not. We do endogenize it at some point, but for the main analysis, we keep that as an exogenous parameter. So we take it as given that the fraction of consumers have installed the ad blocker and the remaining consumers have not. What does the ad blocker do? Well, the ad blocker may at least affect the visibility of ads. If I'm an advertiser and I post an ad with a publisher, well, then it depends. If that publisher is not whitelisted, then the ad will only be shown to those consumers who have not installed the ad blocker. Whereas if I am with a publisher who is whitelisted, well, then this ad will be shown to all consumers. Okay. And we focus on two outcomes which we find are of particular interest. One, which we may call a partial foreclosure, and the other one, full foreclosure. In both cases, only one publisher is whitelisted. In the full foreclosure setting, one advertiser buys an ad slot with both publishers and therefore makes it impossible for the other advertiser to reach consumers, whereas in the partial foreclosure situation, one advertiser is with a whitelisted publisher, the other advertiser with a non-whitelisted publisher, and then the advertiser with a non-whitelisted publisher can only reach consumers who have not installed the ad blocker. This is illustrated the way consumers can become aware of advertisers. If you have an advertiser without an ad blocker, and each advertiser is putting an ad out, advertiser A, for example, with publisher 1, advertiser B with publisher 2, then consumers without an ad blocker will see both ads, and then they can decide which product to buy, whereas consumers who have installed an ad blocker, and if only one of the advertisers is whitelisting, well, they will only see one ad and therefore cannot choose the advertiser who is not on the whitelisted publisher. And if the advertiser, here advertiser A, buys an ad slot with both publishers, then of course advertiser B is not visible to any consumer. The way we set up the math is as follows. First, the ad blocker sets a uniform whitelisting fee. Then the publishers simultaneously decide whether to accept the ad blocker's offer, that is, whether to whitelist or not. Then publishers simultaneously set the advertising fee. Advertisers then arrive in sequential order. So first advertiser A, and then advertiser B, and they decide on which publisher to advertise. And then we have the retail price setting to the extent that both advertisers are visible to at least some consumers. And we look at two versions, one in which that's more for didactic reasons, where the advertiser can price discriminate according to whether consumer has installed the ad blocker or not. So prices can be different. And the other version, which is perhaps my preferred version, is the one with uniform pricing. There's a uniform retail price which applies to all consumers. Well, to see what the ad blocker does, we first should look at the world without an ad blocker. There we have publishers, advertisers, and then the consumers. The strategic players then are publishers and advertisers. And the outcome depends on whether industry duopoly profits are larger or smaller than monopoly profits. So if industry duopoly profits are larger than monopoly profits, then we will have an equilibrium that each advertiser will be visible to all consumers because each advertiser buys an ad slot. Whereas in the opposite case, when monopoly profits are larger than industry duopoly profits, we will have as the outcome that advertiser A forecloses the market, buys both ad slots, and therefore makes it impossible for advertiser B to become visible to consumers. In terms of the surplus distribution, this then means that, well, in one case, we have industry duopoly profits to be shared between advertisers and publishers. In the other case, it will be industry monopoly profits. In the former case, publishers can extract the full surplus. Advertisers will have zero surplus. And in the other case, there remains some advertiser surplus. Regarding the consumers, well, they will be either in the monopoly situation or in the duopoly situation and then obtain the corresponding consumer surplus. So that's the starting point. If you move back in time, there was a time without ad blockers. So that's then the prediction of the model. Now let's introduce an ad blocker and first look at the case of price discrimination, where again we have to distinguish those two cases: situation in which industry duopoly profits are larger than monopoly profits, and the opposite case. So what we will get is a different distribution of the surplus. Now, the ad blocker can extract a fraction of the surplus, and that fraction actually will be alpha. That's the share of consumers who have installed the ad blocker. If industry duopoly profits are larger than monopoly profits, where then the relevant profits are those industry duopoly profits, twice pi d, and the ad blocker obtains a fraction alpha. Whereas in the opposite case, the ad blocker obtains alpha pi m. In the first case, what we will have is that rents shifted from the publisher to the ad blocker, and that's has been the general concern that well, the introduction of the ad blocker said, well, it's like it's a tax in a way, and what we will therefore have is lower publisher revenues. Here, publisher quality is exogenous, but you can easily imagine once you endogenize it, quality suffers. In the other case, in which monopoly profits are larger than industry duopoly profits, it is still true that publishers are worse off, but now also advertisers are worse off. So the rents are shifted from advertisers and publishers to the ad blocker. And what about consumers? Nothing happens to consumers. There's no change. We're either in the duopoly environment or we end up in a monopoly environment. Okay, that summarizes the case. If you want to do a little micro model, I guess the natural candidate price competition with differentiated products is to take the linear hoteling model. That's what we do here. And then you see it doesn't depend really on the fraction of consumers who install the ad blocker. It only depends on the parameters of this micro model, whether we are in the case where monopoly profits are larger than industry duopoly profits or the reverse case. Now let's move to uniform pricing. Now, uniform pricing means that advertisers have to set the same price irrespective of whether a consumer has installed the ad blocker or not. Where can that matter? Well, this can matter because we may be in the situation where just one publisher whitelists. Each advertiser has an ad slot, but these ad slots are no different because the ad slot with a whitelisted publisher gives access to all consumers, whereas the ad slot with a non-whitelisted publisher gives access only to those consumers who have not installed the ad blocker. And this means that there will be asymmetric competition because now the first, say, advertiser A, who has the ad with the whitelisted publisher, has access to all consumers, is in a monopoly position with respect to those consumers who have installed the ad blocker, and therefore has different pricing incentives than the advertiser who is only seen by those consumers who have not installed the ad blocker. And we obtain then a condition which separates as to what will be the outcome in this when we have this possibility of whitelisting. So there may be whitelisting to both publishers, or there may be whitelisting to a single publisher. And the relevant fees now, we introduce a notation for profits in this asymmetric outcome, where we have pi w, that's the profit for the whitelisted publisher, and for the advertiser who is with the whitelisted publisher, and pi NW is when the advertiser is with a non-whitelisted publisher. Okay. And what is important to see why there are now new interesting competitive effects arising with uniform pricing. It's important to see when there's asymmetric competition, this may actually be a rather favorable, somewhat better situation for the advertiser with a non-whitelisted publisher compared to the case where we have discriminatory pricing. So with discriminatory pricing, there's a separate price for the monopoly segment and for the competitive segment charged by the advertiser who is with a whitelisted publisher. And therefore, this advertiser can compete quite aggressively in this competitive segment. Whereas under uniform pricing, the incentives are different for this for the advertiser with a whitelisted publisher, because by setting a low price, it's also sacrificing profits in the monopoly segment. Therefore, we may expect a less competitive outcome when we have uniform pricing. Less competitive in the competitive segment, and in return, since we have differentiated price competition, the advertiser with a non-whitelisted publisher will price less aggressively as well. Okay, so there are these competitive effects, and that affects also the way advertisers and think about the value of having an advertising and having an ad as the outside option of what happens if they're, for example, not buy an ad slot with a non-whitelisted publisher. That outside option changes. So the overall picture is a rather complex one. So in principle, there can be 4 different scenarios. Now, given this is a short presentation, I'm not going to walk you through this table. What I will tell you is, well, let's go back to the linear hoteling model. What happens with there? Then things are actually much simpler. We again have only 2 different scenarios to deal with. And it all matters again whether industry duopoly profits are larger or smaller than monopoly profits. We have this case distinction, and what we will get is exactly the same qualitative result as the one we had with discriminatory pricing. Yeah, so it's not everything is the same quantitatively, but qualitatively we obtain exactly the same result. So now you may wonder, well, why am I walking you through all this? Well, this is a special feature of the linear hoteling model. It's not a general property of oligopoly models. And to clarify this, take a look at another popular model. It's again a hoteling model, but now with quadratic transportation costs. For those of you who are not with an IO background, we'll just take it these are our toy models we play with. And we can then check when are industry duopoly profits larger or smaller than monopoly profits and get a condition there. But the important part, the important message is, and that's what this figure is supposed to tell you, we can now be in different scenarios. In the table I was just showing you for a few seconds, it means we can now be in 3 different scenarios, and particular interest is this scenario in the middle, and there we will see new results. In particular, what we see is that total surplus is no longer unaffected by the presence of the ad blocker. That's what we have had so far. There's one case where total surplus increases, one range, and another range where it decreases. And what's the reason for that? Well, without the ad blocker, we either are in the world of monopoly or in the world of duopoly. Now, with the ad blocker, with one publisher being whitelisted, one advertiser buying the ad with a whitelisted publisher and the other one the ad with a non-whitelisted publisher, we end up in this asymmetric competition in the marketplace between those 2 advertisers. And that means this is a favorable outcome for consumers relative to the monopoly outcome, and an unfavorable one relative to the duopoly environment. This explains the total surplus effect. And we can also look at the consumer surplus effects, advertiser surplus effects, how publishers are doing. The important message here is that once we take uniform pricing seriously, what may have looked as an obvious conclusion on how rents are shifted are no longer clear. I didn't put in the publishers, and it's even possible for these V minus C over T, if we have high numbers for that, that also publishers are actually benefiting from the presence of an ad blocker, and all this is driven by the competitive effects in the marketplace. I could continue to talk about extensions, how to look at endogenous ad blocker adoptions. We do this in the paper, which should be out within the next few weeks. But looking at the time, I used all my time, and therefore I just tell you that this is in a way, parsimonious model of including competition in the marketplace in the analysis of the economic effects of ad blockers. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Philip, do you want to just take over immediately to
yes,
give
please.
some comments?
Yeah. I prepared some slides, so let me see what I can.
You can share them with the button just left from the.
Yeah. Okay, so that should work now.
Mm-hmm.
Can you see that now?
Yes, we can see it. It's just not full screen.
Okay.
But we can read it, so
better?
It's
yeah.
fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now I can't
perfect.
see myself anymore, or Martin making faces while I speak, but I guess that's fine. So yeah, it's good we stick to English. When we were colleagues, Martin was always kind enough to remark that I don't speak proper German. So, and he was also prescient in saying that I would bitterly regret having agreed to discuss this paper. And yeah, at times it was a little difficult to read, I must admit. So let me give you a little bit of background. So advertising is an important and often the only form of revenue for publishers. And in that sense, media markets are different from other product markets because they don't just sell the product directly, but indirectly they sell advertising space. And although there is a lot of research on this, the mechanisms are not entirely understood. So these publishers actually face a trade-off. On the one hand, they deliver customers to advertisers, so that means they become more attractive for advertisers and potentially raise more money that way. On the other hand, customers usually experience this advertising as a nuisance, and that's where these ad blockers come in, because you can avoid this nuisance by installing an ad blocker. So what Martin and his co-authors look at is where a share of customers avoids the nuisance via ad blocking, and then there would be no value to the publisher, right? Because their attention cannot be sold to producers. However, the publisher can circumvent this ad blocking by paying a fee to this monopoly ad blocker, and this is called whitelisting or becoming whitelisted. And what they do in the paper is they look at the effect of ad blocking on overall surplus in the industry and the distribution of rents, not among the three, but the four players. So I made a mistake in counting. So it's the ad blocker, the publishers, the advertisers, who are also the producers and the consumers. And then there's a publishing duopoly, and they have to decide whether to accept the whitelisting offer from the monopoly ad blocker. And if they don't accept this whitelisting offer, so if you don't pay the asked fee, they only reach a share 1 minus alpha of the customers, and like publication or the newspaper, whatever it is, it doesn't generate any surplus per se. So, and what are the incentives of the advertisers? The producers or the advertisers? They can only reach customers, or customers will only buy from them when they advertise in at least one of the two publications. The consumers actually visit both publications. And what they can do is they can foreclose their competitor by buying the slots in both publications. And they can only sell to the consumers that use an ad blocker when at least one of the publishers where they advertise is whitelisted. Okay, so if, for instance, if they only advertise in one and they're not whitelisted, then they only sell to the share 1 minus alpha. If they advertise in both, then they foreclose the competitor, and then they only need to be whitelisted in one to reach all the consumers. So the consumers are willing, the producers are willing to pay for being advertised. Okay, so for it to be seen by any customers. Then there's additional incentive. You want to be advertised to all consumers. For that, you need to be whitelisted in at least one of the publishers. And you're actually also willing to pay for an advertised slot to foreclose your competitor. Advertising is actually something amazing in this model, it seems to me, because there's no resource cost associated with it. The gains from trade can only be realized when a product is advertised. The more products are advertised, and that in here it's just if both producers advertise in one of the two slots, then there's more competition, so price is closer to marginal cost, so that improves efficiency. And there's actually no nuisance cost. It's just, at least in the original model, so it's just exogenously given that some consumers have this ad blocker, but they're not hurt in any way when then the publisher they visit is actually whitelisted. Now, when it comes to the analysis, I'm not going to repeat all the results because it's actually there are a lot of results and a lot of distinctions. So I just make sure what the distinctions are. So one is the relative size of monopoly versus duopoly profits, right? So those are essentially the gains from foreclosure. You could also think about how differentiated the products are, right? So if they're very differentiated, then actually duopoly profits are quite close to monopoly profits. Then there's the ability of producers to discriminate between consumers with and without ad blocking. It seems to me that this only occurs in equilibrium. It only occurs when there is partial foreclosure, if I'm right. So maybe Martin can comment on that. That way, you can't have a monopoly over consumers with ad blocking, right? Because the competitor has no ad blocker. And then the other interesting aspect is that this uniform pricing actually softens downstream competition. So it's something like maybe, I don't know, I think this is called a fat cat effect, right? Because a partially blocked consumer by lowering price does not reach all consumers. He only reaches that share 1 minus alpha that actually only know about him. So that reduces the benefit from lowering price and makes pricing less aggressive or shifts the best response curves. It was a little that this Martin did not end up talking much to me. It was not really clear to me how this endogeneity of installing the ad blocker works. I also looked for the math, and I didn't find it in the appendix, so it's probably worth writing it down. What it seemed to me is that there must be a coordination problem, because how it affects the product market, me installing the ad blocker, actually depends on whether other consumers do the same thing or not. So whether I'm alone. So yeah, would be interesting to hear how that is resolved. In terms of results, with ad blocking, at least one publisher whitelists, and ad blocking sometimes results in partial foreclosure, which we don't see in the model without ad blocking. So I don't have much in common. The question is, can we always rank in terms of consumer surplus? So partial foreclosure is worse than no foreclosure, but better than full foreclosure. So I'm wondering, are there actually conditions under which the presence of ad blocking or an ad blocker entering results in us moving from full foreclosure to partial foreclosure, or in terms of, or moving from no foreclosure to partial foreclosure, whether these conditions can be derived. Yeah, so in terms of policy, why is the ad blocking market so concentrated? Should we be worried about this? So the courts have talked, it seems more about the practice, but not about the concentration. The role of price discrimination, I also found interesting. Is it realistic? Is it happening? And yeah, I think you were more clear now about the effect on consumer welfare. The results on publisher surplus are ambiguous. So again, now we should, and you already alluded to that, maybe talk about the feedback on quality eventually. So thanks very much. That's all I have. I hope I can see you. I guess I have to stop sharing.
Yeah, thank you very much for your input, Phillip. Do you want to answer some of the raised questions, Professor Peitz?
I'm happy to address some of them, and the version Phillip had was not the version I'm presenting. So I think some of the answers have been at least partially been addressed. I think in particular the consumer surplus effects. But before mentioning, I think it's I agree that the base model is a bit stark in a way, in the sense that advertising is indeed socially optimal. However, if you don't look at the model, you might think, well, in this world, then ad blocking should be clearly bad. I mean, because ad blocking seems to reduce. I mean, there's even then less advertising available, less products seen to the consumers. But that argument is actually, that statement is not necessarily correct. So even in this base model, where indeed advertising is socially optimal, a planner prefers a world, or the welfare maximizer prefers a world under some conditions in which the ad blocker is present, because, and this now answers one of your questions, which we now have finally worked out in the also in a specific micro model, there is a range of parameters such that we are moving from full disclosure without the ad blocker to partial disclosure with the ad blocker. And I think these are combines the first statement with this question on the consumer surplus effect. I think Phillip was struggling most with the extensions of the base model, where we're endogenizing the decision of consumers, and the reason is that we haven't written up everything there, so we kind of put down a few statements, and we still have to work out the details on how we should think about it. And indeed there is a question about coordination problems, and then the question which follows from that, whether there are multiple equilibria, and definitely that's something which we have to fully write down in order to provide the answer. But I think the main message for us is that as long as you're willing to buy the behavioral assumption that consumers, when deciding whether to install the ad blocker or not, they are not anticipating the effect of their decision on the prices they will eventually see. So as long as you're buying that assumption, things are easily carry over, and we obtain that the interesting outcome is the robust one. So the ones with partial or full foreclosure, and the outcome where actually there's whitelisting by both publishers, that disappears, but that's also not really that's not the interesting outcome, and that's also perhaps the problematic one if you think about, then nothing really changes, and why should consumers actually install an ad blocker if they see as much advertising before as after? Of course, it's a simple model if you enrich the model a little bit and take into account that the ad blockers also do something, that they change a bit how advertisers can advertise. So the kind of high nuisance ads are taken out. You could even justify that there may be whitelisting by multiple publishers, but that's not the outcome we're really emphasizing, because that's something for that, you don't need to analyze these kind of competitive effects. New is the focus on partial and full foreclosure.
Yeah, I should say actually, I mean, it was what was very good about the presentation, or the big improvement over the paper as well, is these graphs now you have with hoteling, where you also see what happens relative to the surplus, because these tables where you just write them down are not very helpful, because what you really want to, I mean, what's really interesting is the case where it's like no ad blocking versus ad blocking and the change in surplus.
So the tables are kind of a sanity exercise. If I sit down again, that after half an hour, I understand the table again.
Thank you very much. Now would be time for general questions from the audience, right? Michael Peneda.
Yes, thank you for the presentation. I have only one question, and that is, I wonder what precludes in your model, or what is the rationale about precluding the entry of new ad blockers in the market, given the positive profits they are able to extract?
Well, the assumption that there is only one ad blocker, that's what it prevents in this model. Well, there are reasons in the real world why some ad blockers are more successful than others. And so I guess if you're kind of with some network effects, you can motivate why this market is highly concentrated. So that's not put into this model because we start with this assumption. But if you ask me, well, how can we motivate that this is not a fragmented market? And you might think, I mean, why isn't this fragmented, right? It's clear that there's some profit, or it seems that there's some money to be made. And it's not that there aren't alternative offers. It's just that hardly anybody is using those. And the question is, well, why is that the case? I'm not sure whether you have installed an ad blocker, but many people who have installed an ad blocker, they ask, which ad blocker should I install? And then everybody installs the same ad blocker. And then you see that ad blocker makes a lot of money. It can actually develop its business models. The others make hardly any money. And they somehow get stuck in what they started with and cannot really provide an attractive alternative. So that would be my justification of why we are actually seeing an extremely highly concentrated market.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other comments or questions from the audience? So I myself have a general question. So I think you partly answered it a bit, but maybe some other people like me just are more interested in that. And the question is, so beside a quality signaling effect of advertising, I was wondering whether there are not also positive spillover effects between the two advertisers. Also, if one is the only one who is whitelisted, but just in viewing those ads with the product, at least assuming that the products are not very, very differentiated from each other, there should be a positive spillover effect to the other advertisers as well, right? Because I mean, it's a substitute, at least to some part. So and just advertising a product should raise the awareness among consumers who will then start a search where to buy from.
So, I mean, I'm not saying that we have the model of advertising. We have the arguably, or at least a very simple model of advertising, which is very much in the tradition of how advertising is modeled in economics. So it's taking just this purely informative view. It's about creating awareness of the existence of a product. Now, there are others. I mean, you mentioned signaling, so we are not doing signaling. You could do signaling. You could do some kind of persuasive advertising. You can do consumer interactions. And the point you're mentioning is that advertising a product, making consumers aware of a product, may encourage consumers to search. That's certainly viable, and at least one of my courses likes to look at market environments which have this or similar features, so where there are search elements in there. But I don't think it will. I mean, these models are much more complex. So you can think about looking at different micro models and look what are the implications for our reduced form profit function. That's kind of motivating the way we write up the paper, is first to state general conditions on reduced profit functions. And that's about the profits which are realized in the marketplace. And then you can build your favorite model. And there you can include spillovers if you want and things like that, and see under which conditions in this micro model the conditions in the reduced form are satisfied or not. So in that sense, you can do it. And I think you can learn something on top of that. For example, how does spillovers change the regions? Do we get more or less partial foreclosure, for example? So these are questions you can address. But I don't think it will endanger the general message we are providing in this paper, at least with this kind of informative view of advertising. If you do very different kinds of advertising models, then it's different. Also, in the fact that nobody knows about products absent advertising may be seen as an extreme assumption, but I also don't think that this is an essential assumption. So one can, if one likes, you can build up much richer micro models to look at it. The only warning is, as we have seen in the reduced form, things can get very complex. And the question is then, what are we going to learn? The message here we want to convey is, while publishers have been very much putting emphasis on this one possible outcome of the installation of an ad blocker, namely that they are suffering and the ad blocker is gaining, which holds in a large set of environments, but it's not, first of all, it's not necessarily true, even abstracting from more sophisticated stories. So that's the first observation. And secondly, who will gain and who will lose apart from the publishers? Looking at advertisers, looking at consumers, that's not a priori not clear at all. And well, Phillip is my discussant. I mean, it's of course always a cheap way, building up a simple theory model and saying, well, what we need actually, this shows that we need empirical work, because theory doesn't provide us with very clear-cut predictions.
Thank you. Well, give me the data. I will provide the empirical model. Any other questions or comments? No, not at the moment. Okay, that's fine as well. Thank you very much, Professor Peitz, for your presentation and for being here, at least in a virtual reality with us. And thanks, Phillip, for your comments. And that was really helpful.
Thank you for spending your scarce time on this.
You're very welcome.
Good. Then I wish you all a nice afternoon, and hopefully we see each other again. Perhaps if you have time to join us in Vienna sometimes, we would be happy to welcome you here at WIFO. So perhaps the next time, if you have more time.
That goes to me or all the participants?
Oh, you. Sorry. I mean, everybody can come and visit us who would want to, but well, no, I was thinking about you. So we would be very happy to have you here someday. So
thank you.
Good. Then it was my pleasure, and have a nice afternoon. Bye. Thank you.